This is Dennis Raimondi with the Coffee League, found at thecoffeeleague.com, talking about everything coffee, coffee culture worldwide. Very interesting guest today, Joanna Furgiuele, who is with Coffee Kids. I believe she's in New York City. And Coffee Kids, we'll talk about what they are and what they do and how they help empower young people in the coffee industry, especially the coffee farms in, I guess, mostly third world countries. Joanna, thank you so very much for coming on the show with me today.
Dennis, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for reaching out to us.
Great. So, give us a little description of what Coffee Kids, what that organization, I believe you're a nonprofit, what they are and what their mission is.
Yeah, so Coffee Kids is a program where we work with young adults in coffee farming communities. So we work across Latin America and Africa, really trying to invest in our young coffee farmers and encouraging the next generation to take over the industry and start understanding how to look at farming as a business and themselves as entrepreneurs and elevate the understanding of coffee within their communities and having youth take on more leadership roles, in their local areas, so that we have investment in rural communities and we have a continued supply of coffee into the future.
All right, a couple of questions here for me. My understanding is that most, and I'm talking about specialty coffee, and I'm not sure if that's the only area you're involved in, but most specialty, what we call specialty coffee going to third wave type coffee shops, places like Blue Bottle, places like Cafe Grumpy, or any of the Stumptown, that this coffee is mostly grown in a few countries in Central and South America and Eastern Africa, like Ethiopia. And so that was, so are those specifically the countries that you're doing work in? And the other part of the question would be, are most of this coffee, is it coming from small farms, or is it coming from big gigantic farms owned by corporations, and how what that all looks like?
Yeah, great question. So we are working with a lot of specialty coffee partners, but we don't exclusively work just in specialty coffee. So we kind of have a range of qualities of coffee that we work with, because we work with a wide variety of farmers. But the areas in which we have Coffee Kids are in Central America. We're in Trujillo, which is the border region of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Then we have another group of youth in Colombia, and then we're also in Tanzania. So those are our three main geographic locations at the moment where we're working with young farmers. And these are all young adults that are coming from communities where it's all smallholder farming. So they're all, families that own very small plots of land and really depend on the ability to organize and work together in order to be able to effectively sell their coffee to the market. And so we're trying to introduce young adults into what's happening within coffee, and then help them raise the quality so that they can become the customers of a lot of the specialty coffee companies you mentioned.
Right. Okay, give me more specifically, maybe, let's say you go into Tanzania, and looking at your website, and people should check this out, it's coffeekids.org. It says Coffee Kids uses entrepreneurship training, mentorship, and seed capital to help young farmers see themselves as entrepreneurs, develop the skills to launch their own businesses, and connect to the global coffee industry. All right, sounds great. You go into Tanzania, you send in 2 people, 3 people, 10 people. What exactly do you do on the ground when you go into a country?
Yeah, so for example, in Tanzania, and all the places where we work, so Coffee Kids is a part of a global foundation, and so we work with staff who directly live and work in these communities. So we have a very small operation here in New York where we're doing some of the supervising of the program, but the actual people working with the youth are people from these communities and people who have lived there for a long time. And so particularly working with youth, that's really important because it's when you're working with youth, you must work with their families. And so having a deeper relationship with communities is the way that we can reach out to youth in this area. And so through connections that we have with producer associations, so adult farmers, we work with them to explain what our program is about and reach out to youth within the community. And then we invite youth in to understand what that is. And then really the youth are self-selecting in. So if they are interested in staying in their rural community, they're interested in learning more about coffee, then what we're trying to do is provide the resources for them to be successful in that. I would say in a lot of these communities, really coffee in general is facing an aging population of farmers. So the average age of a coffee farmer is around 50 years old. And obviously it's a laborious industry to work in. Farming is not easy. And so it's important for people to begin making transition plans and understand how their kids can take over this work. And so right now, a lot of times the youth are not necessarily included in trainings like agricultural trainings, or do not have very easy access to any sort of capital. So those are the areas where we focus. So as you mentioned, the three ways that we work are through training, mentorship, and then providing financing for the youth. And it's all around a lot of focus on business development. So we do teach agricultural skills, but it's also about what it means to be an entrepreneur, how to think creatively, how to be innovative, how to assess the market in your local community, and develop a business plan for a business that the youth actually want to start. And then we have local mentors right now that help with some specific skills or help to encourage the youth. And then as the youth finish the training, they have developed a business plan, and then that's when they receive financing for that, which mostly looks like a microfinance loan.
Right.
For
Joanna, if I can interrupt. So somebody comes in, you provide seed capital, and I would think this is key to it. With that seed capital, do they then go out and buy their own farmland, or are they going out and working with existing farmers who are already farming the land?
Yeah, so they're working within their existing farmland. So a lot of this is about allowing for youth who are already working with their family on their land to actually negotiate with their family to take ownership over part of that land and create, whether it's growing new coffee plants or developing a side business, to do that on that land. We also have youth that are already actively managing coffee land. So I should mention that the name is Coffee Kids, but we really work with young adults. So it's youth between the ages of 15 and 30. So really at that point where they're thinking about what they want to do with their future and making decisions around whether they want to migrate out or whether they want to invest and stay local.
Oh, okay, so as you're painting this picture for me, as I'm understanding it, you have it sounds like a number of small farmers in third world countries. What happens if, and maybe this already happens, somebody big comes in, say Blue Bottle just got a big influx of money, or it's just somebody from that country, and they decide, I'm buying all the farmland. I'm going to control 80% of the coffee farming in Tanzania, and I'm going to be a big corporate farm and just hire people as I need them locally. Does that happen? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And how does that affect what Coffee Kids does?
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing about the landscape of coffee farming is kind of if you think about the area where coffee is grown, it's generally in very mountainous regions, so very remote. Often you're driving multiple hours up windy roads to visit farmlands, and so these people who own very small plots of land, it's generally because obviously that land has been transferred from previous generations, but it's also because geographically, that's really what makes the most sense. It's very hard to have large plots of continuous land. And so large farms absolutely do exist, but really about 70 to 80% of coffee farmers only own small plots of land. And that's regardless of whether a company wants to buy lots of coffee from one area, they may do that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the ownership of that land would change dramatically. So which is why a lot of our focus is around helping farmers to really evaluate farming as if it is a business. So a lot of times
Hmm.
people will talk about coffee farming more as an activity, and we want them to see it as a business, because then you're really evaluating your profit and loss. You're understanding why, how the market dynamics work, and you understand why it's important to organize with your neighbors so that collectively you have more volume and you have better bargaining power,
Right.
and you have better negotiating power. So that's a lot of the work that we try to do
Right.
with these farmers.
Okay, so these kids get trained, young people, young adults,
Hmm.
and they go into farming. Um, a big problem when getting any product from a third world country, we know this from China and elsewhere, is how the labor is treated, how they're paid, how they're compensated. Is all the profit going to the big guys in Europe and the United States and in Asia, or is it fair, what they call fair trade, where people are being reasonably compensated, fairly compensated for what they're doing? How does that fit into this formula?
Yeah, so I think, as as part of Coffee Kids, we're definitely very active in a lot of the industry groups and trying to elevate the understanding of the situation of farmers. There's a lot of conversation going on now, particularly in specialty coffee, around the profitability of coffee farming in general. And a lot is that it's very easy. Well, it's not very easy, but there's been a lot of work done to track the profitability on the consumer end. But there hasn't been in the past as much work on tracking the profitability for farmers and understanding their costs. And so the benefit of specialty coffee is that generally farmers are getting paid a higher price because it's based on that quality. So what we're trying to do is help farmers have access to best practices in agriculture and increase their productivity so that they are able to have higher quality and higher volume so that they can make a better profit off of that. We do not directly work within the market so much. We do a lot of the community building. And so as we're working with these young farmers, what we're trying to help them do is understand their place in the market and how to evaluate what is profitable or not. And so actually, some of the businesses that the youth have started are really around having an alternative income stream in addition to coffee,
Hmm.
which then tends to make it more profitable or more sustainable over a full year's time.
Right. Okay. Your website, coffeekids.org, and again, I encourage people to look at the site. It's fabulously laid out, a lot of information. It says you're set up as a nonprofit, and there's an opportunity if people want to send in a check and donate or fundraise for your organization. They can do that. Who funds you, and what was the motivation initially behind setting up this organization? Who's behind
Yeah.
it ultimately? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so the way our funding works is we are part of the Hans R. Neumann Stiftung, which is a German foundation, and Coffee Kids has been part of this foundation since the end of 2015. And so the benefit of being part of the foundation is that they are able to cover our overhead costs, which then means that donors and supporters, all of the funding that we receive goes directly to our programs and directly to the field. And so our donors are really, and supporters, which we encourage everyone to become part of our supporters circle, and that is a combination of really small to medium-sized roasters, coffee lovers and enthusiasts, and really just those that are interested in in community development, in education, and in youth and rural areas. So that's where our funding comes from. Overall, Coffee Kids has been in the coffee industry since 1988. It was initially an independent nonprofit organization and was really critical in really starting the conversation around these rural communities. And so it developed for a long time and then grew to a point where it needed to transition into another entity, and that's when it became part of the Neumann Foundation. And now we've really specifically focused on this young farmer demographic because we feel like it's a really critical place to continue improving the livelihood of coffee
Right.
farmers and the sustainability of coffee.
No, Joanna, the Neumann Foundation, I believe,
Mhm.
that was started by a very powerful, wealthy German family that's been in the coffee business for many generations. Is that right?
That is true. Yep. Yeah, they initially started, many decades ago, around the 1950s, within the coffee industry and grew the coffee business side. And then in around 2005, decided to start a foundation because they really saw that a lot of the work um, in terms of actually creating sustainable coffee farming and sustainable livelihoods for farmers required investment outside of the business and really wanting to be able to collaborate with lots of different coffee entities and development partners. And so they started a completely separate foundation that is financially separate from the Neumann Coffee Group, which is the company, and it specifically focuses on improving the livelihood of coffee farmers. And so a lot of that work is around organizational development, agricultural training, improving around climate change, climate variability, and incorporating more women and youth within
Hmm.
coffee farming communities. Yeah.
Right. I mentioned this to you before we came on the air that, and you told me you knew somebody I interviewed recently, Hannah Neuschwander, from World Coffee Research, and that's another nonprofit. I believe they're a nonprofit, and they're set up and funded by a lot of folks in the coffee industry, especially specialty coffee, to because the concern there is that the demand for specialty coffee is going way up, but the ability to produce the coffee is being very much affected by climate change in places like in Kenya where coffee farming land is being bought up to put it and developments or real estate is being developed and whatnot. So an organization like World Coffee Research seems to have interests that kind of overlap with yours. Do you work with organizations like that? Climate change, the lack of farming land for developing and expanding coffee in a number of these countries. Are these issues that you deal with, and do you work with others?
Yes, we definitely really work to reach out to a lot of different partners because all of this work, it needs to be integrated. Anything that involves, elevating the level of the communities and addressing big challenges like climate change and gender equity really take a lot of different partners coming together and for everyone to work together, of course, including those farmers and the local community. And so, for example, with World Coffee Research, they are one of a key partners in another program that we have in the foundation. That's a USAID program, and it's the Alliance for Resilient Coffee, and that is specifically looking at how do we evaluate changes in variability in the climate and getting farmers the best tools so they can assess how to adapt and mitigate to any changes that they're experiencing. And so World Coffee Research is an important part in that. We are looking at ways that we can maybe integrate youth in this way, because what we see, and I think the exciting thing really about working with youth, right, is there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. Youth are really excited about doing things differently. They're excited about change, and that doesn't mean it has to be completely different from other generations, but they're interested in using new tools to do the work. And so that could include new varieties of coffee plants, new technologies, new growing methods. They're more interested in experimenting, and they're also the ones that are at the forefront. And if they're going to invest in coffee, they're going to be facing the most amount of change. And so it makes a lot of sense to bring these two together.
Hmm.
And so then I would say, other partners that we work with are some of the organizations like the International Women's Coffee Alliance, and others that are working on these same types of challenges and opportunities within coffee.
Great. Now, also wanted to ask about you and your entry into the world of coffee. I believe you were in graduate school in North Carolina, and you were doing a internship with Counterculture, and while, during that period of time, I believe you went to Peru, visited coffee farms. Is that correct? And if so, what was your experience like?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was working on a master's in environmental management and an MBA combined, and was in North Carolina, which is where Counterculture is based, and they were interested in doing some research around the impact of climate change on coffee communities. And so, a group of six of us students went to three different countries across Latin America to really understand the perceptions of coffee farmers around climate change, to understand what types of strategies they were already using to adapt or mitigate, and to understand how that information could be exchanged across regions, though to better increase the ways that Counterculture as a company could invest, and what the farmers were most interested in changing. And so I spent the summer in Peru working with a cooperative called Senfro Cafe in northern Peru, in Jaén. And it was an incredible experience. It was just really, I was just out visiting a lot of farmers, getting to see a lot of different types of coffee lands, and interviewing people at the cooperative level, and also other like local legislators and stakeholders within the community, to understand the landscape of what was going on. And then we took that research back and combined it with work that had been done in Colombia and Guatemala. And then we're able to give recommendations to Counterculture. And the exciting part is that they decided to invest a second year of students to bring that research back to the cooperatives, which is always really exciting, particularly as a student, that you don't want to just take information out of a community, but you want it to go back and make a difference. And now Counterculture has shortened these into climate change workshops that they're implementing with some of their producer partners.
Joanna, what
Yeah.
were some of the things that farmers wanted to change or see changed?
Yeah, so a lot of them were just really interested in having new ways of understanding what was happening in other areas. So, for example, better ways of drying their coffee. So a lot of areas are seeing more unpredictable rain patterns. So having things like solar dryers or enclosures that can help them dry the coffee even when it's raining is really important, because if it doesn't dry in the right amount of time, it will get moldy, and that really impacts quality. Another thing is just like better ways of irrigating or managing water for those same reasons. And then it was just interesting to have an exchange of understanding, well, what was the benefit in some areas of, like in Peru, there was a really strong program of integrating youth and elevating young coffee farmers at the head of a lot of associations. In Guatemala, they do a lot of great work in integrating women, and having their own women's line of coffee. And in Colombia, there's so much support from the federal government that farmers have a lot of really great access to real-time information that helps them make really good decisions. So those are just some examples.
Great. Well, Joanna, I can't let you go without asking about your own coffee consumption, and having done it when you went and did your internship with Counterculture. Was the coffee industry and new to you, and from the time you started with Counterculture to your time now with Coffee Kids and working in the world of coffee, have your tastes changed? What is your coffee consumption like? How much do you drink? What type of coffee do you drink, if at all?
Yeah, so I definitely am a coffee drinker. I come from a primarily Italian family, and so
Right.
grew up with coffee and espresso in the house. So, was always a coffee lover, but definitely did not know very much about all that is involved with coffee, and sort of the different tastes and qualities of coffee. And so working with Counterculture, and then after that, I spent a year working in sales with Joe Van Gogh, which is another coffee company in North Carolina. And there I spent a lot of time tasting coffees, sharing them with other people, and I really developed a better taste for Black coffee, liking, drinking, and comparing different origins of coffees. I feel like it's gotten me more excited about drinking various types. And so I do drink a lot of specialty coffee for sure. I do like it black, but then I also do like espresso drinks, particularly cortados or cappuccinos.
There you go. That sounds great. Not very different, but similar to mine. My taste. So if anybody wants to find out more about Coffee Kids and learn more about what you're doing or support what you're doing, how would they get that information?
Yeah, so the best way, as you mentioned, our website is coffeekids.org. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. On Instagram, it's at coffee.kids. And then you can always email myself, Joanna, at coffeekids.org, or through our website. And we would love to talk to you, answer any questions that you have about coffee in general. We love talking about coffee or ways to get involved. And we really support any investment into these young farmers who are super motivated and excited to be your future suppliers of coffee.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me and the Coffee League. Thecoffeeleague.com is where we're found. And till next time, and we'll have you back on the show because we want to keep posted on this and up to date on everything that's happening, going right back to the farm. And that's one of the great things about coffee these days and well-trained baristas and roasters. They'll not only talk about the cup of coffee you're drinking, but how it got there and everything that has to do with the creation of coffee. It's fascinating. And our goal here at the Coffee League is to educate people about that so they can enjoy and appreciate coffee even more. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Dennis, thank you so much. And we're really excited about everything that you're doing with the Coffee League and bringing out all the different parts of what makes coffee so great.
Great. Till next time. Thank you.
Thank you.